Joseph, you hadn't heard any more since Friday, have you, on Tom?
No, I haven't. Thank you for
Yeah.
asking. No, I figured that would be the next question. I didn't mean to alert you. I know it's sad, and you're very sensitive. So I'm sorry for that.
No, no, that's all right. I was just trying to make sure I'm caught up
Yeah,
because
no, you're right. Absolutely.
um because we're certainly gonna keep him in prayer for whatever for what seems like a hopeless situation, but we'll see how it goes. All right, change glasses.
Hola.
Hola, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good, good. How you doing?
All right. I can't complain. It was a good day. Got the class lesson done and started working on next week's sermon. Uh,
You're
It's
an
gonna be
achiever, huh?
well, yeah, I just want to get it all. I want to get that sermon knocked out tonight because then I got to get in my garden on this week and get stuff done. So okay, what's it telling me here? Okay. Okay. All right, so there we go. I think everybody can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good deal.
Mm-hmm. You can see it.
I want everybody to know that in Tree of Life Messianic Congregation, that I am happy to announce that uh, we have probably the best Hamantaschen maker that I've ever encountered. And
You're here.
unfortunately, unfortunately, I only got one of them.
Mm.
And um, so, Rudy, good on you, mate. You're the best Hamantaschen maker I know. That's why I always buy my Hamantaschen and bring them in because we've tried it. and it just never seems to work out very well. But you had it, man. You nailed it down. You just had it.
He sure did. It was delicious. I had like 2 or 3 of them, and they all tasted delicious. So
No wonder I couldn't get but one.
you had to be at the table early on that one.
Martha's
were
right,
delicious.
man. I just got one and it was gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It was good.
they were great.
Yeah, there was. I think it was about maybe 65 that came out of I made 2 batches, for about 65 cookies. I think it was.
Well, you did a great job. So thank you for that.
Shalom, Hag Purim Sameach.
Hey, I pour some back to you too, Warren. Good to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And I've got Carl. I guess you're down in Florida now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's a good place to be.
Yes, it is.
In the 1st of March. It's a good place to be rather than northern Wisconsin. So,
Yep.
okay. All right. Well, we got 37 verses to go through tonight. So let me okay, get the chat over here, and we got this. All right. I think we're just about ready to go. Warren, did you have something? You just not unmuted yourself yet. I mean,
No, let me unmute it now. Hold on.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody. You know the rules. Mute everybody, and then if you have something to say, then just unmute yourself and say away. We're all, for the most part, we're all friends here. So so we just say away. All right, let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. So, yeah, it's a good time. We did our, for those of you that are not part of our congregation, we had our Purim play yesterday for the kiddos, and it was a lot of fun. And so it got back, I appreciate everybody that helped load all of that stuff back up in my big old pickup truck, and because it would not have fit in Pat's little bitty pickup truck. So that's why we brought the big one. And even at that, it was packed up pretty tight. And so I got it all unloaded and into the house, and even we've got it now up back in the closet where all of the Purim stuff goes, the costumes. And I don't know how long it's going to be able to do that, because each year Pat buys more costumes. And so it just keeps expanding in that closet up there. So anyway, we got it all done. We're good to go. And so it was a lot of fun. We had a good time with Oneg yesterday, and then next week we're going to be back to our Torah class. So anyway, chapter 2, and those of you that are on Facebook or finding us on Facebook, just welcome in. And I do want to invite you to, if you're in the Houston area, to drop by and worship with us at Tree of Life. We're at 2775 Kingsland Boulevard. We meet in the St. Peter's United Methodist Church. And so anyone and everyone is welcome. So, all right, here's my ubiquitous timeline that sometimes it fits with what I'm teaching, and sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes the commentators have different views as to when something occurred, and so it's put into this thing. Sometimes it matches, and sometimes, most of the time, it does. But when they did with Malachi over there, that one didn't match all that well, because people, they have Malachi all over the place. All right, And so then I left this this chart in here for the time being, because it does give you the dates of important things that go on during the book of Jeremiah. That kind of helps keep it in perspective of where different things were, when it happened and so forth. So left that in there. And so let's get started. Were there any comments or questions from anybody about chapter 1 before we get started here? Okay. I gotta see. Okay, that's not. All right. So Jeremiah 2, verse 1. Again, the word of Adonai came to me, saying, Go and cry in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, Thus says Adonai, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, and the way you followed me in the wilderness, in a land not sown. Israel was kadosh to Adonai, the first fruits of the harvest. All who devoured him were guilty, were held guilty. Catastrophe overtook them. It is a declaration of Adonai. So, this verse here, the 1 through 3, opens up the first major oracle in the book of Jeremiah, and it's I guess you would say it's God's covenant lawsuit preamble. Starting up with a lawsuit against. It's a virtual lawsuit against Israel, and so there's laying out some of the background information here, and so it recalls Israel's early devotion, and then it contrasts it with the unfaithfulness, and so it just follows then on through chapters 2 to 6. We're going to do chapter 2 tonight, and as we'll continue on. So he talks about it. Said, I remember the devotion of your youth. And that's one of the things that when God is talking to them, and he doesn't come in here with a big condemnation or something. God is saying, no, he says, guys, I remember the good times we had back, and we're talking about 700 years earlier. And he says, I remember that I gave you the Torah, and you were following it kind of sort of, but you did that, and you embraced this idea of these 12 tribes becoming the nation of Israel. It's kind of like the love of a bride, the honeymoon period there. So God's even talking about that the part there in the wilderness, when he's leading them out of Egypt, that he's talking to them as if that was a honeymoon timing. And he said, you followed me in the wilderness, in a land not sown, meaning that, life was tough. And so, but they followed God, and, he provided the manna for them in the wilderness. He provided water. Always they had water. Sometimes it was a little bit tardy in coming, or not exactly, in view, but they always had water. Nobody ever died of thirst. And so he always had provision for them. And so this opening here establishes that Israel's current apostasy that they find themselves in is not due to divine neglect, but it's basically a tragic departure on from a once very beautiful relationship. And he talks about how Israel was holy to the Lord, and the first fruits of his harvest. So these two metaphors here, holy is set apart. Holy does not mean sinless. Holy means set apart for God's purposes, set apart to be his possession, his treasured possession, he called them. And the first fruits. Well, what are first fruits? First, and that's the first and the best portion of the harvest, consecrated to God. And so this metaphor emphasizes the priority, the value, the expectation of purity and Israel's role among the nations. They were supposed to be a nation of priests, and meaning that they were to bring the precepts of Judaism, the truth of the one true God, bring it to all of the nations. They were supposed to be a light to the world. And so the problem then with these metaphors here, where they're holy and first fruits, they kind of underscore that tragedy, the big tragedy of Israel's later idolatry, where they just went off the rails. They had abandoned this privileged identity rooted in the affection of God, is what it amounted to. And then he goes on to remind them that, a lot of people attacked you. A lot of people came against you, like, Amalek, Moab, Midian, and others. And God said, but you know what? They were judged. No harm was going to come to you. I took care of them. And it was divine judgment on Israel's enemies that demonstrated God's faithfulness to them. And so, it's kind of sad, because God took care of Israel so much so. And then now, that nation that God took up for, they've abandoned God. They've forgotten God. They just walked away from it. Really a tough thing. And so here God is reminding Israel of their original devotion, and he shows them how far they've gone, and he's calling them back into that intimacy that they once enjoyed. And so this is not some, thinking back to the good old days or anything like that. It's a legal and emotional foundation for basically the prophetic rebuke that's going to be following in the next verses. So Jeremiah 2:4-8. Hear the word of Adonai, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. Thus says Adonai, what fault did your fathers find in me that they strayed so far from me? They walked after worthless things, becoming worthless themselves. They did not ask, where is Adonai, who brought us up from the land of Egypt and led us through the wilderness, through a land of deserts and rifts, through the land of drought and distress, through a land where no one travels, where no one lives. Yet I brought you into a fertile land to eat of its fruit and goodness. When you came, you defiled my land. You made my heritage an abomination. The Kohanim did not ask, where is Adonai? The Torah experts did not know me. The shepherds rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after unprofitable things. All right, so this is the first major indictment section of the book of Jeremiah, and it moves from that tender memory of a covenant love into the courtroom charge. The tone shifts from affection to here, astonishment, divine astonishment here. And so what follows is you're going to see the legal aspects that God is bringing against. It says Jacob and Israel, so he's including everybody there. The southern kingdom of Judah, the northern 10 tribes of Israel. It's for all of Israel here. And so it says, hear the word. Again, that brings us back to Deuteronomy and that covenant renewal language. So God is not merely speaking, he's bringing charges as the wronged covenant partner. And so he's making them all accountable. No tribe can claim exemption from this. So it says, what fault did your fathers find in me? So he's just asking, so what did I do? I always took care of you. And so God is this showing his innocence here. And he says, it's not for information. This is exposure. Okay. There was no fault in God. The absurdity of their apostasy is the point. Okay. He's pointing that out. Says, I did not harm you. You're the ones that walked away. And so there's this drift away from God is there's three verbs there that if you look at they went far from me. That's a relational distance. They followed after worthlessness, a pursuit of idols, and they became worthless, moral and spiritual deformation. So Israel exchanged the God who rescued them for gods that cannot rescue. The people became what they worship, empty, powerless, and unstable. So they completely forgot what God had done for them in the wilderness, coming out of Egypt, and they failed to remember God and his provision. So Israel was given a land. I mean, I say given, God said, you're going to have this land. You just got to go in and run the inhabitants off. But it says when you go in there, you're going to be able to run them off, and then you can take over their orchards, their fields, their vineyards, everything that they had, their walled cities, except for the one there that the walls came tumbling down. That one they didn't take over. But the rest of them, God just handed it over to them. And yet, given all of that, they fell into the idolatry and just the pagan practices. And so Israel was meant to sanctify the land. They were supposed to come in there and clean it up, get rid of all the pagan influences, and instead they polluted it through idolatry, injustice, and corruption, and many other things. So, and then you notice there when God said, in my land, he didn't say in the land. He says, no, my land. That means that the land was not Israel's to begin with. It was God's land. He was just lending it to them, allowing them to live on his land. And so when they go against God, then they're also going, they're betraying the trust, the gift that he had given them. So then it talks about the priest did not say, where is Hashem? The Torah handlers didn't know God. The shepherds transgressed. So, and then the prophets prophesied by Baal. So we got 4 leadership groups here. The priests, they're the ones that should have been the overseers of all things related to God and his relationship with people, but they didn't seek God. The Torah experts, the teachers, the professors, they knew the scriptures. They could teach the scriptures, and yet they did not. They lacked this covenant knowledge, the intimacy with God. We see a lot of that in today's world in some of these so-called seminaries, where you have professors that are not only are they not believers, in many cases, these professors are just biblical technicians. They don't even believe in God. And so what a tragedy that is. I would want my money back if I went to a seminary and found out that I had instructors that didn't even believe in God. So then it says the shepherds. Well, who are the shepherds? Well, that's not the guys out there with the sheep. No, this is the kings, the officials, the rulers, the administrators. These are the government people, the political leadership. They also violated the covenant ethics of the Lord, and so here they with their policies and everything. We've seen that in the minor prophets, just expounded over and over and over again. The old saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, that's kind of the way these guys were. And then the final of the four, the prophets, the very ones that God had sent to Israel to call them back into intimate relationship with the Lord. These guys also, they didn't speak for the Lord. They spoke for Baal, the pagan deity. And so it was a total systemic collapse. Every pillar of Israel's religious and civic life was corrupted. And so, that's quite a contrast to the ministry and the calling of Jeremiah. And so, I guess you could say that the problem here is when leaders lose their covenant awareness, the people will inevitably follow, and whatever direction that so many times, so often, when you have leadership that they lead the people down a different way that they should not go. Nazi Germany was a great example of that. Sometimes the reason that the people went that way is that if you don't go that way, you get killed, and nobody wants to get killed more than once. And so that was one reason that you see leaders can bring people away from the truth. And so we have a threefold covenant breakdown here in these verses. That the forgetfulness, Israel forgot who God was and what he had done for them. And then they had a misplaced worship, where that they pursued these little g gods, the stones, the sticks, the things that they could make with their hands. And then they also had the leadership failure. Those that were entrusted with guarding the covenant abandoned it because it wasn't profitable for them. So this is not merely historical. These words are not particularly just historical, but they're also diagnostic. It's telling how that spiritual drift happens. And it wasn't through some sudden rebellion. It was neglected remembrance, unexamined desires, and unfaithful leadership. And it was through generations. So verses 9 to 12. Therefore, I will plead with you again. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will contend with your children's children. Cross to the coast of Kittim and see. Send to Kedar and observe carefully. See if there's been anything like this. Has a nation changed its gods, even though they are not gods? Yet my people have exchanged their glory for worthless things. Be appalled at this, O heavens. Be utterly horrified and dumbfounded. It is a declaration of Adonai. So what we have here is it intensifies this lawsuit that was begun in verses 4 to 8. The tone shifts from astonishment by God to accusation, and then from accusation to cosmic outrage. Hey, heavens, be horrified at this. And so these verses form I guess you'd call it the theological core of chapter 2. And so Israel has committed an exchange that's so irrational that even the heavens are summoned to witness it. So what is it? He said, okay, I'm going to continue with you. I'm going to try to stay with you here. And I'm going to this word of contend, it's covenant language, and God is not going to drop the case. He's going to pursue justice across generations. He's going to keep going after the people to come back and get back into covenant relationship. And so there's this is not punishment for ancestors' sins, but the reality that the same patterns continued in the present generation. And so you'll see that what the fathers and the grandfathers did well, it just keeps on going down through the ages. And so this contention that God talks about, it's not vindictive, it's restorative. He wants to bring Israel back into the fold. And so it says, cross to the coast of Kittim and then over to Kedar. That's from the west to the east. And he says, look around. Have any of these nations out there ever changed their gods? No, they always have these different nations. Every nation had its own set of deities, okay, and they were regional. And so that's when nations would fight each other and one would prevail over the other, then they would say, well, our God is stronger than your God. Our God's bigger than your God, that sort of thing. And so they would have these gods, but even in defeat, they hung on to their local deity because that's all they had. And so God is saying to Israel, look, you have the one true God. You have got the only thing that's worth following, the God that can actually do things, and yet you have gone out and just, thrown Adonai under the bus, even though they didn't have buses. They threw God out to follow these little idols that are sometimes big idols, but they're still just stone, just wood, just nothing burgers, and they couldn't do anything. And so that's just the amazing thing about it, that these guys would, these pagan nations were more faithful to their gods of rock and wood than Israel was to the one true God. And so it was so preposterous that God is calling on the heavens, says, look at this, just look at it and shudder, and just, have you ever seen anything so crazy? So this sin was not merely rule breaking, it was a disordered worship, and it violated the very heart, soul, and grain of creation. So, but it still shows, I think, the heart of God, where he's trying to get people to come back into covenant relationship with him. So let's see, where are we at now? All right, so he just couldn't understand, how could Israel be so corrupt and sinful? All right, now here's one that I think, when I was looking online for various just pictures and stuff like that for this lesson tonight. This particular verse, the living water contrasted to the broken cisterns, cracked cisterns, it's all over the internet, and it's the imagery is really to me it's good. It's good image of, okay, what is it says, my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me. the spring of living water, and they dug their own cisterns, cracked cisterns that hold no water. All right, so when they're talking about when he's talking about living water, spring of living water. I don't know how many of you have ever seen or been around springs, where water just kind of comes bubbling up. And if you find land that has an artesian, we call them an artesian spring, or if you drill down a little bit into that aquifer and it comes bubbling up, you got an artesian well. But it's one that you don't have to pump. It's just hydraulic pressure from the earth itself, the mountains and so forth, that push the water up. If you've got one of those, you have got a very valuable commodity. A number of years ago, we put in an offer on a piece of property, a ranch up in the Texarkana area in Bowie County. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this particular piece of land was that it had a spring on it that had been in operation for generations. Now, it wasn't, it's not something that it would not fill up a swimming pool very quickly, but it was pure, clean water that came bubbling up out of this fissure in the earth. And over the years, they had taken and improved it a little bit. Actually, they had boxed it in where the water was coming out, and they even kind of concreted around it so that it wouldn't slough in and close in the spring. And so it's a valuable commodity. I love the idea of having spring water. And if you've ever been in the mountains and places where you can get water out of these springs, it's oftentimes very cool and just has a great taste in it. And so that's what he's talking about, this living water, that fountain of living water. It's something that comes out of the ground and it's clean, it's pure, as opposed to the cisterns. And what are cisterns? Well, cisterns are just water tanks, and they can be any kind. In the Western United States, we have windmills, and so people back in the day that have, well, still today we have windmills, but the water would come up, they'd pump it up into a tank, and if it was for your house, they'd pump it into a tank that was higher than anything in the house, so that then you could run piping from that tank into your house, and you would have, quote, running water. Well, and in some cases, I've seen houses that were built in the 1800s that had a cistern underneath the house, or they had tanks. Now we have water on my own home here. We have water tanks that collect rainwater and into these big, barrels, and they're not nearly as big as I would like to have, but it keeps my wife's flowers watered with rainwater, and the rest of the time, any kind of a rain at all, it overflows them and they just run off. But that's a way of using water or getting water is through rainwater. And I remember seeing those same kind of things, water coming off the metal roofs into a tank and into the cisterns, the tank, or they would dig out underneath the house. It would be kind of a big tank or a tank where the water would flow into that, and then you could hand pump. I'm talking back in the 1800s now. Hand pump the water out of this cistern up into your house. Now, the problem with cisterns is that once the water gets in there, then it's also it can get nasty. It's susceptible to critters, and you certainly don't want a raccoon or a squirrel or something wandering off in there, somehow drowning in your cistern, because that would make the entire cistern undrinkable. You couldn't use it for anything. You'd have to drain it all out, clean it up, and then hopefully get rain, and make sure that however that critter got in there, they couldn't get back in there again. But once the water gets into the cistern, then it's no longer living water. It is just water. Now, in some cases, that water may be all that you have, and having nasty water is better than having no water at all, because you can do things to make nasty water drinkable, but there's not a whole lot you can do if you don't have any water at all. And so here God is saying, okay, you have turned your back on the idea of living water, and in contrast to, you got your cisterns over here. But guess what? Your cisterns are cracked. They won't even hold water. So you have nothing. And yet you have rejected the source, the living water, which is God. And, that's, you can recall where Yeshua talked about that whoever believes in him, out of him would flow the living water. That's what he's talking about, that living water that comes out of a spring, or water that brings forth life, is what he was talking about. So, here's a couple of examples that I wanted to show you, and one of them is a cistern on the right here, and you can see that it's got weeds growing in the bottom of it because there's no water in that thing. And then over to the left is a spring, an artesian spring, where the water is coming up and then floating on down. You remember the story of where Gideon separated his army from 10,000 down to 300 by how they drank water. It's called Gideon's Spring, and the water is still flowing there today, 2,500 years or 3,000 years later. That same spring is still going. The Gihon Spring under the city of David in Jerusalem is still flowing today. The water is still coming out of there on its own naturally, and it is cold, it is clear, and that's where it goes through Hezekiah's tunnel, and you can look down there. The water is just crystal clear, but I still would not want to drink it because there's way too many tourists walking through that stuff, and so walking through that water. So it looks clear and it looks clean, but some tourists not so clean. All right, so going ahead with 14. Is Israel a servant, a slave by birth? Then why has he become plunder? Young lions have roared at him. They have roared loudly. They have made his land a waste. His cities are in ruins and uninhabited. Even the sons of Noph and Tahpanhes have grazed on the crown of your head. And so here it's talking about Israel. Are you a slave? Were you born a slave? No, they were not. Israel was not born in slavery. Israel was born at Mount Sinai as a free people. But now they're a slave. Why? Because they broke covenant, and God said, when you break covenant with me, then there are consequences. And so these nations have come through and destroyed Israel. They've come in and taken the wealth away from Israel, and so they talk about how that they were oppressed by Egypt and Assyria. And these are the very nations that Israel, or Judah actually, was trying to, well, in Israel too, they were trying to make alliances from one to the other, playing these nations, these empires, one against the other, and trying not to get caught in the middle. And it didn't work out very well for either Israel or Judah. And God chastised them for that. He says, all you had to do is call on me. I would have taken care of it for you. But no, you went out there and made your own alliances when I told you not to do that. And so, that's not what you were called to do. And so now these young lions, they come through, and the lion, of course, was a symbol of Assyria, and they just they tore up everything, and they just laid waste to the countryside. And that's what God was rebuking them for, making these treaties instead of trusting him. 17 to 19. Have you not brought this on yourself when he led you in the way? But now, what is on the road to Egypt? Drinking the waters of the Nile. Or what is the road to Assyria? Drinking the waters of the Euphrates. Your own wickedness will rebuke you, and your backslidings will chide you. Know then and see how bad and bitter it is for you to forsake Adonai your God, nor is fear of me in you. It is a declaration of the Lord Adonai Sabaoth. All right, so here we see that basically Israel has no one to blame but themselves. Okay, this is a self-inflicted wound. This is where they have shot themselves in the foot because of their own unfaithfulness. And so he says, have you not brought this on yourself? You forsook the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the verb here implies that it was a deliberate abandonment, not an accidental drift away. Judah knew the covenant terms, and they just walked away from them. They knew what they were supposed to do, but those women of Midian, wow, they're so hot. And yeah, they have their own gods, and yeah, if we wanted to get with the women of Midian, we'd have to take their gods. So yeah, we know that, but wow, those women of Midian, they're so hot. And that sort of thing, and that's okay. I'm trying to make a little light of it, but that was the deal. Israel deliberately walked away from God because they did not want to stay on that narrow path. Maybe it just wasn't that much fun. And so then they trusted these foreign powers, Egypt and Assyria, that talking about the way to Egypt and drinking the waters of the Nile, going to Assyria and drinking the waters of the Euphrates, and having seen those, neither one of them is one that you want to drink out of without doing something with it. Okay, let's just say it that way. It's not all that good. It's water, you can drink out of it, but not that good. And so he's here they were seeking life security out of this water, and they found none from that. And so again, this is where God is trying to tell his people, look, don't learn a lesson from this, that you should be able to see that you made these mistakes, and what does it mean to you? It's like touching a hot stove. What does that teach you? Don't touch a hot stove. And so it only takes once or twice, and before you figure out, don't touch the hot stove. But Israel, over and over and over again, they opted for pagan idolatry rather than the one true God. And he said, so it's your fault, and you should be learning something from this, but my fear is not in you. And they're just it's not ignorance, it's just loss of covenant reverence. They just chose not to follow God. So but at the same time, even in this judgment, Jeremiah kind of reframes it as it's severe, very severe mercy. Like James Dobson called it tough love. And so this was discipline designed to bring Judah back into covenant fidelity. All right, so verses 20 to 22. Indeed, long ago I broke your yoke and tore off your bonds, and you said, will not serve. Instead, on every high hill and every green tree, you sprawled out like a prostitute. Yet I had planted you as a choice vine from completely faithful seed. How then did you become to me a wandering wild vine? Even though you wash with lye and use an abundance of soap, the stain of your iniquity is before me. It is a declaration of Adonai. So, here God is reminding him, okay, I brought you out of Egypt. I broke that yoke of bondage that was on you. And yet you chose not to obey me and to obey God's commandments. And so instead, you went into the land, instead of cleansing the land, you went into the land, and on all these high hills where they had these various symbols of idolatry, said you laid out there and under the groves of the trees, where the nice, cool underneath the trees, said you laid out there like a prostitute. And you can create your own imagery for that. How would a prostitute lay out there? And so we'll just leave it at that. Okay, y'all got good enough imaginators that you ought to be able to figure that out. And so Israel said Israel was planted as a good seed, but instead they became a wild vine. It's very disheartening when you plant good seed. You think you have good seed, and this has happened to me a few times where I get seed from someplace, and I plant it, and it starts to grow, and I look and I said, well, that's a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be. But then you let it grow because sometimes you get hybrids that are a little bit different looking. And I've planted stuff before in last year, planted spaghetti squash, and one of the hills of and actually two of them of where I planted these spaghetti squash, what did I get? I got zucchinis instead of spaghetti squash. How did that happen? Well, sometimes that just happens, I guess. And it said, even if you tried to clean yourself up, you cannot clean yourself up. You cannot make atonement for yourself. You can't hide the fact that you are sinners. 23 to 25. How can you say, I'm not defiled? I've not gone after the Baalim. Look at your behavior in the valley. Recognize what you have done. You are a swift young camel galloping aimlessly, a wild donkey used to the wilderness, sniffing the wind in her passion, in her heat. Who can restrain her? All males that pursue her will not tire themselves. At mating time, they will find her. Do not run while your feet are bare and your throat is thirsty, but you said, there is no hope. No, for I have loved foreign gods and I will go after them. All right, this is a time here where it's very, very, actually very, very sad, because Israel is saying now, look, I'm not defiled. I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't me. I didn't do nothing. That sort of thing. And they said, I haven't gone after these the Baalim, the prophets of Baal. But then God says, look at your behavior in the valley. What does that mean? Well, what it means is the valley of Hinnom, which is over on the west side of Jerusalem, deep kind of a little valley there. Well, that was also, there's another name for that, Gehenna, because they would throw stuff in there and burn it, and that said the fires never went out because there was always some kind of trash down in that valley burning. Well, what else went on there? They said, you're like a young camel that's galloping aimlessly. Well, a young unbroken camel is no good to anybody. You can't do anything with them. And then the wild donkey used in the wilderness, sniffing the wind in her passion. Okay, this is kind of gross, but what is she doing? She's sniffing that wind, that wild donkey sniffing the wind, trying to find where a male donkey had urinated someplace in the sand, and then finding that, and then she's sniffing, trying to find, okay, where is that male donkey? Because she's now in estrus. She's wanting to be mated. And so it said the males will not tire themselves. They don't have to. All I got to do is stand there, because here comes this female donkey that will come right up to them and play the part of wanting to be bred by them. And that's what Jeremiah is talking about here of Israel. These idols that were out there, Baal and Ishtar, Molech, and various others. The people of those places did not have to go and try to recruit the Jewish people to come and they didn't go 2 by 2 on their bicycles with their little white shirts and black ties saying, would you like, can I tell you about Baal today? No, they didn't have to do anything like that, because the Israelites were chasing after those idols headlong, just like a crazy donkey that's in heat, is what he's trying to say. So you probably didn't pick that up from reading that, but that's what it was. So, but then Judah, they said they just kind of viewed themselves as, well, we've been doing this so long, it's all we know, it's what we can do. We're just trapped in it. There's nothing else that we can do. And that's baloney. There's always something that you can do, because God's grace is sufficient to take care of any kind of sin that you have committed. And as long as you're drawing breath, I believe that there is an opportunity for repentance, no matter who you are and what kind of situation you find yourself in. I will have to keep going here, because otherwise I'll start preaching and I will not get through this lesson. As a thief, okay, I want to show you, here's some stuff from the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, and these old graves and old places like that. And then here is a picture of it. You can see Mount of Olives over here, the temple, and this area here, right in here, the Valley of Hinnom. And it meets up with the Kidron Valley over here. And so this was basically, they would take and throw their refuse down in this deep valley, and it became the city dump. And so that's what that reference was for. Okay. And so, as the thief is shamed when caught, so the house of Israel is shamed. They, their kings, their princes, their Kohanim, and their prophets, they say to wood, you are my father, and to a stone, you birthed me. They have turned their back to me and not their face. Yet when they are in trouble, they say, rise up and save us. Where are your gods that you made for yourself? Let them come. If they can save you when you are in trouble, go ahead for it. Then you have as many gods as you have cities, O Judah. And so here we're seeing that okay, Israel is not, they're not sorry that of the sins they committed. They're just sorry that they just got caught for it and that they're being called to account for it. They're really not sorry. There's no repentance there. And so again, we see that all strata of Judah's leadership are in the same boat. None of them are sorry for what they did. They just got sorry that they got caught. Kind of like politicians today. They do not repent for what they did wrong. They just are sorry that they got caught. And so, and here's the thing that you may not have picked up on. It says, they say to wood, you are my father, and to a stone, you birthed me. Well, this is backwards, because the Asherah poles were a feminine deity. They were made out of wood. And let me show you. Okay, here's an Asherah pole, and this is just one of them. The idea of the Asherah, of course, it's got the big, the prominent is the breasts. Okay, that's what a child is nourished from. So that's what the idea of the Asherah, the wood as the mother or as the feminine thing that they would worship. And then, of course, here you have the obelisks of Baal. And now these are not so graphic, but there are obelisks of Baal that are okay, so they're phallic symbols, okay? And so that's the male side of things. But then what's Jeremiah saying here? To the wood, the female part there, you are my father. And then to the stone, the male part, you birthed me. They got it just completely turned around, even in all of their confusion. They are confused people. And so said, look, if you can if your gods will come and save you, let them come on. Then that way, if you do, then you got as many gods as you have cities, because every city had their own little gods. So it says just go for it. And so let's look at 29 to 30. Why do you strive with me? You have all rebelled against me. It is a declaration of Adonai. In vain I struck your children. They took no correction. Your sword devoured your prophets like a ravaging lion. So here Judah's trying to turn the tables on God and say, that they're acting like that God is the defendant. They're the plaintiff. They're the ones that have been wrong. Poor Israel or Judah, and it's God that's doing all this against us. And again, they got it backwards. And so Israel, all of Israel, it doesn't matter who they were. All of Israel was the transgressor. They're the ones that were not faithful to covenant. They disobeyed God. They just refused to obey his commandments. And so he says, I contended with your children to no effect. Nobody would listen. I tried to get them to come back and come into covenant relationship. Nobody would listen. And so even the prophets, your people, your sword killed my prophets. And so he's not happy with that. Verse 31 to 33, you generation, heed Adonai's words. Have I been a wilderness to Israel, or a land of thick darkness? Why do my people say we are free to roam? We won't come to you anymore. Can a virgin forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire? Yet my people have forgotten me, days without number. How clever you are in your ways of seeking love. Therefore, you even taught wicked women your ways. So we're at a point now where God is saying, look, have I ever put you in a place where I didn't take care of you? Even in the wilderness, he took care of them. They had manna, they had quail, they had water. Their shoes didn't wear out, their clothes didn't wear out. Women got tired of wearing the same clothes, I'm sure. But anyway, they didn't wear out, and they grew with the people as they grew. And so he says, I've never forsaken you. And yet you're saying, you know what? We don't have to follow you, but we're free to go and do whatever it is that we want to, because we're free people. And so he goes back and he says, can a virgin forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire? And yet people have forgotten God, and they've done it for generations, with the days without number. And so I got a picture of these are Yemenite brides, okay, Jewish people from Yemen. All right. And so, yeah, that is pretty ornate stuff. If you, and how could you forget getting all dressed up in that attire for your wedding? And so, but it said, your sin has gotten to the point where you are so into this sin that you're even teaching the wicked women how to sin. You're so nasty and corrupt that and he had already called them prostitutes. So you yourselves are teaching the prostitutes how to be more horrific, if you get my meaning. All right. So verse 34 and 35. Moreover, on your skirts is found the blood of innocent poor. You did not find them breaking in, yet in spite of all these things, you say, I'm innocent. Surely his anger is turned away from me. See, I will pass judgment on you, since you say I haven't sinned. All right, so what is the blood of the innocent? Remember that there's a lot of the stuff that went on here in this time period were they had temple prostitutes, both male and female. And these female prostitutes would sometimes become pregnant. And then what do you do with these children? Well, if they were a temple prostitute, they probably were not of the mind frame, or they would probably not make good mothers. Let's just say it that way. And so a lot of times these were the children that were given up to the altar of Molech. And that's where the babies were thrown alive into a hole in this metal statue, and they just threw the babies in there alive and burned them alive. And so so they're talking about the innocent blood. It could be that, and it also could be the poor people whose lives were disrupted and maybe slain because all the leadership, they were so corrupt, they didn't care. These poor people, they're just collateral damage that nobody cares about them. So, but Judah's proclamations said, no, we're innocent, we're innocent. God said, no, you're not, and you're going to be punished for it. And so finally, the last two verses, why do you make light of changing your way? You will be put to shame by Egypt as you were put to shame by Assyria. You will also go out from there with your hands on your head, for Adonai has rejected those in whom you trust. You will not prosper by them. All right, so he's mocking them for the idea of changing back and forth from the gods. Okay, they go after Assyria to ally themselves again, with against Egypt, and then another time they go with Egypt to ally themselves against Assyria. And so each time that you do that, then you have to take on the gods of that country that you're allying yourself with. And so he says, you keep changing back and forth, and what it's going to amount to is you're going to get to the point where you're going to be defeated, and you're going to go out, like this with your hands on your head. That's what they're talking about. You see prisoners of war when they capture them, and they'll make the prisoners walk with their hands behind their head, because why? You can't do any fighting if your hand is behind your head, and so that's what they would do. All right, and so because God said, look, I have rejected all those that you put your trust in. You're supposed to trust in me. All right, so that's the lesson for tonight. And now, Warren, you got your hand up. And see that.
It's not directly related to this, but it's a biblical principle which we were actually seeing played out in real time. We're celebrating Purim, and in the Purim story, the country in which all that took place was Persia, which is
Iran,
which is Iran. And in that story, we see where the leadership of that country and had turned against the Jewish people and had sought to destroy them. And in the end, Haman, he ended up being hung on the very gallows that he had prepared for the Jewish people. And so, what we're seeing just this week is pretty amazing. It's pretty timely. And just as it says, where it says in the book of Esther, chapter 8, where it says, I got the verse here, it says, Verabim me'amei ha'aretz mitchayadim ki nafal echad hayudim alehem. And many of the people of the land became Jews because the fear of the Jews had come upon them. And of course, there is a lot of Christians in Iran, and they are rejoicing. I've seen video after video of Iranians in Iran worshiping and praising the Lord, worshiping and praising Jesus. And so, I mean, and so here's something happening in real time. Basically, this exactly kind of like what happened in Perm in those days, being played out now, where and not only is Israel being saved and protected, but look how many are coming to the Lord in that very country.
There you go. Well, and we're seeing stories of how the Lord is revealing himself to the Muslim people. And many of them are coming to faith in Yeshua because he appears to them in a vision or in a dream. And so, yeah, this is it's a turning point here. And we're going to have to be very careful in the United States and Israel that we don't allow a vacuum to be created in Iran that is, it's kind of like when Yeshua says, when you kick a demon out of a body, if you don't clean the house, then and fill it with something good, then 7 more worse demons are going to come up and take residence. So we certainly don't want
Yep.
that.
Well, this is why we have to continue to pray, don't we? I mean, this is
Absolutely.
we can't treat this strike as the solution by itself, but God's got a plan.
Yeah.
And we need to be praying in accordance with what the Lord wants to happen here. And so this is an opportunity and really an obligation for the people of God to stand up and pray that righteousness
would prevail
and comes about.
Yep. And it's not easy having been in situations where we called it regime change with nation building afterwards, having been and done that on the ground, in a previous life. It's not easy to do, and it's
well, I don't believe the goal here is nation building. I don't think we're talking about troops on the ground at all. I don't.
Oh, no.
Because I know the president doesn't want to get into that, but this is the best opportunity for the people of Iran to stand up and claim back what they've been suffering under for 47 years, and they are rejoicing all over the world. You see all these all the Iranians in the streets and rejoicing. So it's pretty amazing.
But there's going to be some sticky things because the people of Iran don't have any weaponry at all, and so they're kind of defenseless. The only thing that they got is their massive amount of people against the RGC. So I see RG. All right, whatever the Iranian army. So, but yeah, it's a good opportunity for the people of Iran, and we just have to keep praying that they will rise to the occasion, and that we would have a good outcome of this that would make Israel safer.
Amen.
All right. Any other comments or questions anybody might have from the lesson tonight?
Hey, Steve.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hi there. I found it pretty interesting when you were reading. I think that was in 2023. It was like they were trying to, I guess, in a sense, seemed like they were trying to convince God that they weren't, just convince the Lord they weren't as bad. Either they were like in total denial, or just so self-deceived, or just outright lying. You know, to me, they were just so bold in what they were just trying to convince him. You know, we're not all that. We're not all that bad. You know, how have we been defiled? And then when you read, I think it was in, a little bit later on in 27, what they said to the wood, I thought that was just really interesting you brought up, because you're saying the wood was the female, right?
Yes.
And then, okay, and then you are my father. And then they turn around into the stone. It says, you give birth. And that just made me think about, you know, some of the propaganda we see today, you know, with that whole switching thing of, you know, trying to convince the boys, that, you know,
Right.
you know, some of the stuff that's going on there, and the devastation it has caused the children and also the families when they realize a little bit later, you know, what they've done to their bodies and everything. But it's just so demonic. So I that's interesting. I'd never noticed that before. So yeah.
Okay. Well, good deal. Good deal. Thanks for the comments. Okay. Anybody else got a comment?
Thank you for teaching us tonight.
Just, you're welcome. I enjoy it. I really do.
Yes.
I always learn something, and you know, to see some of this stuff, and then, you know, you pick up something and you figure out, especially like the wood and the stone, and they got them totally reversed. That was an aha moment for me. I said, "Oh man, I never saw that before."
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. And you got everything you needed on the bit about
Yes.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Or,
Thank you.
Zoom. Okay. All right, Martha.
It's kind of curious to me how the adultery that the Israelites had done against God and the covenant, that would be the description of how God continues to portray the Israelites, that they have committed adultery and prostitution against him, and yet he continues to tolerate that disassociation of them from him. Whereas if in real life, in the culture back then, if the woman was found in that situation, she was immediately struck down, and dealt with. So it's amazing to me that God uses those two very strong adjectives to describe Israel and the Jewish people, but yet his tolerance to continue to work with them does not cause, it causes mercy and hope to prevail, and he doesn't kill them and wipe them out and annihilate them.
And that's why when I hear misinformed people, let's just say it that way, misinformed, that they talk about how that the God of the Old Testament was a God of judgment and not a God of love, but the God of the New Testament, that's the God of love. And it's God's the same. He doesn't change. And the whole idea is that, his people they played he says they played the whore against him, and yet he still loved him. And that's encouraging for me, because sometimes, we just kind of get all messed up and what we deserve, and hopefully we won't get what we deserve, but we'll get mercy from God instead.
Yes.
Well, God is in covenant with them, isn't he? God is in covenant with the Jewish people, and so he promised that Abraham, that they will always be a people before him. That's also in Jeremiah, and that so that he would, as long as there's heaven and earth and the stars and the sky and the tides and whatever, the Jewish people will always be a distinct people before him. And of course, we already studied through the minor prophets. We went through Hosea, where Hosea is commanded to go marry a harlot.
But he does.
He says, "This is what you've done for me." But yet, God's covenant and His promise he will not relent on his promise. God will take care. God will not reject the Jewish people.
That's right.
And God will judge those who try to diss the Jewish people.
Yeah. Carmen, you had a
Well, I was just saying, well, yes, and he loves them and all that, but he still, as we've read, he still disciplines them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Amen.
to love doesn't mean you don't get punished or disciplined
Amen.
for doing that wrong over and over and over and over again. He's warning
He
them over
He
again.
disciplines us too, right? Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
not going to get rid of. He won't get rid of
does-
everybody. Yeah.
He disciplines you and me, you know. So
Yeah.
well,
but
if
that's
you
God, that's God's heart is one of restoration and of love.
if
Yes,
you love
yes.
your children, you will discipline your children.
Yes.
By disciplining them, you're not showing that you don't love them. You're showing exactly the opposite, that you do love them. You want them to grow up to be productive, good people.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Oh.
Rabbi. It's always great to hear you, and it's a blessing. And
Well, good to have you with us, Warren. We appreciate
Yeah.
that. So,
Shavua Tov to everybody. And
all right,
have,
then happy
enjoy,
Texas Independence Day tomorrow. You guys from New York didn't know that, but tomorrow's Texas Independence Day.
There you go.
All right.
Is that where Texas on the Brazos
Declaration.
River? Where they going to do that?
Well, that's Texas Declaration of Independence. Yeah.
Yeah, on the Brazos River. That
Yep.
that cabin there.
What on Washington on the Brazos? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Bonnie